The 5th of November, 1991. Amidst the biting chill of the North Atlantic, a luxury yacht named the Lady Ghislaine glided through the water, named after his daughter. The vessel was a 21st birthday gift from British media tycoon Robert Maxwell to his youngest child, a grand gesture of love from the business titan to his crown jewel. Little did anyone know that on this very day, the 68-year-old Maxwell would go overboard, naked, into the dark waters. 3 days later, his body was found floating in the Atlantic. His death, an enduring mystery that remains unsolved to this day, instantly ripped Ghislaine Maxwell's life away from the top of the world. Overnight, the billionaire's daughter, who owned a collection of 53 luxury estates in Oxford and rubbed shoulders with the global elite, found herself a bankrupt heiress buried under £460 million in debt. In an even more shocking turn of events, the woman who had collapsed in grief at her father's funeral fled to New York, where she crossed paths with a man named Jeffrey Epstein. From that moment on, her fate took a dark, drastic turn, shifting from a high society socialite to a convicted felon, ending her chapter with a grim 20-year prison sentence. Hey guys, it's Sean, and welcome back to Trace Zero. Today, we're diving deep into the life of Ghislaine Maxwell. We'll explore what it was like growing up in her father's shadow, her desperate search for a foothold amidst the glitz and glamour of the New York social scene, and her slow descent into the darkness that made her one of the most controversial figures to ever shake the world. Buckle up, because you never know how deep this hole goes. Christmas 1961, at an exotic private villa on the French Riviera, Ghislaine Maxwell entered the world. As the 9th child and youngest daughter of Robert Maxwell, this long-awaited little princess immediately became the golden child of the family. By then, Robert was no longer just a lucky refugee who had survived the Holocaust. He had transformed himself into a media titan, controlling dozens of Britain's most prominent newspapers. With immense wealth and power at his fingertips, he wielded massive influence among Europe's elite. When it came to his youngest daughter, Robert spared no expense, seemingly ready to pour his entire fortune at her feet. He purchased a staggering 53 luxury homes in a row in Oxford, turning them into a private estate for the family, and even commissioned a custom super yacht christened with her name. From a young age, she was groomed with an aristocratic upbringing, from horseback riding and piano lessons to becoming fluent in multiple languages. Ghislaine was a fixture at royal banquets and high society galas. Even Prince Charles was once a guest of honor at her home, while Wall Street's heavy hitters always greeted her with wide smiles. To the outside world, Ghislaine had won the genetic lottery. She had it all. Yet, beneath that overwhelming shower of affection lay a suffocating level of control and a shadow that proved impossible to escape. In reality, Ghislaine's childhood was a far cry from true freedom. A tragic accident had left her eldest brother in a coma for 7 years before he finally passed away. This tragedy transformed Robert, who was already naturally temperamental and power-hungry, into a man who was far more paranoid and obsessive. He ended up pouring all of his massive expectations and his need for total control onto his youngest daughter. He meddled in her every social interaction, dictated her studies, and even demanded she remain perfectly poised just to please the power players in their circle. At every banquet, she was expected to proactively charm the elite. In the business world, she was groomed to help her father pull strings behind the scenes. With a practiced smile and impeccable manners, she slowly devolved into little more than a social asset for her father to expand his network. Under her father's direct tutelage, Ghislaine learned from an early age how to read a room and anticipate people's desires. She became a master at masking her true intentions behind a facade that appeared soft, graceful, and composed. She learned exactly how to please powerful men and how to survive the cutthroat pressures of elite social circles. To her father, she was the sweet, darling daughter, yet she was never permitted to be her own person. Despite living in the lap of luxury, she remained forever trapped in his shadow. This bone-deep dependency eventually became the core of her identity. She grew accustomed to leaning on powerful figures for survival, compromising herself to get what she wanted, but she never learned how to develop an independent personality or a sense of true morality. Without realizing it, this core nature became the most dangerous omen for the life that awaited her. To truly grasp the motives behind Ghislaine's every move, we have to look straight into the shadows cast by her father, Robert, a darkness that runs far deeper and is more unpredictable than anyone could have imagined. These shadows went far beyond the typical control-freak ambitions of a business tycoon. They were thick with the fog of espionage and tangled in the murky world of global politics. Robert Maxwell was never just your average media mogul. According to declassified state archives and long-whispered rumors in the intelligence community, Maxwell was a master of the game, a triple agent skillfully playing the KGB, Mossad, and MI6 against one another. From the Kremlin in Moscow and Downing Street in London to Mossad's headquarters in Tel Aviv, he had access to them all. Leveraging the vast resources of his media empire, he harvested political and business intel across borders while maneuvering between the world's superpowers. He traded secrets for favors and played his ace in the hole to amass power, making him a silent pawn in the high-stakes geopolitical game of the Cold War. Even his Oxford estate, which looked like your typical posh manor, was a fortress of secrets. Every corner of that house was rigged with the most advanced surveillance bugs of its time. Those bugs weren't there to catch burglars. They were installed to record every word spoken by his guests and, even more chillingly, to monitor every move of his own family. Ghislaine grew up in a world where privacy simply didn't exist. From a young age, she was used to the sound of her father speaking in foreign tongues, to mysterious figures on the phone, watching him shred classified documents in his study, and seeing a revolving door of cold-eyed strangers in black suits coming in and out of their home. The first lesson she learned from her father had nothing to do with high society etiquette. It was a cold, hard principle. Information is power, and owning someone's secrets means owning them. This cutthroat intelligence mindset would later become Ghislaine's blueprint for navigating the New York social scene, and eventually the very foundation upon which she built her own criminal network. Robert's funeral in 1991 brought this aura of mystery and unease to a fever pitch. It was a far cry from a typical tycoon send-off. Instead, he was given what looked more like an Israeli state funeral. Scattered among the European business and political elite were 6 intelligence chiefs from various nations, attending in near secrecy. Clad in long black coats with sharp eyes scanning the crowd, their presence on the fringes felt chillingly out of place among the mourners. Ghislaine knelt before her father's casket, sobbing so uncontrollably she nearly collapsed. Yet, out of the corner of her eye, she couldn't shake the sight of those shadowy figures. As the casket was slowly hoisted, she felt more than just grief. She felt a creeping, inexplicable dread. She knew all too well that her father's true legacy wasn't just a mountain of debt or a crumbling empire, but rather it was the dark secrets involving the world's most powerful forces. And in the end, it was these very secrets that would become another set of shackles, slowly crushing the life out of her. Her family was in absolute shambles. Hurled from the top of the world straight into the gutter, New York became her last and only hope for survival. 1991 marked the most critical turning point in Ghislaine's life. Her father's sudden death didn't just strip away her only protector, it blew the lid off a massive fraud scandal that had been festering at the heart of his business empire. In a desperate bid to plug the massive holes in his business, Robert went as far as embezzling £460 million from the pension funds of tens of thousands of his employees. When the news broke, it sent shockwaves across the entire United Kingdom. Overnight, the Maxwells were hurled from the top of the world straight into the gutter. The once mighty business empire collapsed instantly, leaving tens of thousands of retirees to watch their life savings vanish into thin air. Ghislaine, once adored as the billionaire's golden daughter, was rebranded overnight as Britain's most wanted social pariah. The elites who used to swarm around her suddenly vanished, and her old friends didn't hesitate to turn their backs on her. Her bank cards were frozen, her properties seized, and even stepping out of her front door meant facing the insults and spit of strangers on the street. In England, she no longer had a square inch of ground to stand on. Cornered and desperate, she took what was left of her savings and caught a flight to New York. To Ghislaine, New York wasn't just a destination, it was the only life raft left. This glittering megacity held boundless opportunities, serving as a playground for the world's billionaires and elite. In her hand, she still held on to the last remnants of her father's network, Wall Street titans and European A-listers who once did business with Robert. They were her last hope for a new foothold. She felt that with her high society background and social grace, she could easily reclaim her spot on New York's stage of luxury. Little did she know, this shimmering city was about to become the gateway that would drag her down into a profound darkness. Ghislaine's first few days in New York were nothing short of pathetic. The billionaire's daughter, who was once pampered by luxury, now found herself holed up in a cramped Manhattan apartment, desperately trying to keep up appearances by crashing high society dinner parties whenever she could. This jarring fall from grace left her constantly on edge and hungrier than ever to find a new protector. She became a fixture at elite parties, showing up dressed to the nines and keeping her conversation sharp, all in hopes of snaring someone with real influence. But then, and this was where the wheels of fate began to turn in silence. At a Wall Street party in late 1991, she finally crossed paths with Jeffrey Epstein. Hey everyone, before we dive into the video, we want to announce that we're launching a brand new segment called Trace Your Story. For this segment, you can send us a real-life story you've experienced, from horror and cheating to crime or any other true story you have. Send us your story at Sean Varel, traceyourstory@gmail.com, using this format. Email subject, Trace Your Story. Story title, Your Title Here. Tell us your experience in as much detail as possible. Feel free to include any supporting photos or evidence if you have them. Optional contact, your WhatsApp number or another way we can reach you for more information. Don't worry, you can absolutely send your story anonymously if you prefer. We'll do our best to create a video and tell your experience. I'm really looking forward to your emails, and who knows, your story might be the very first one featured on Trace Your Story. Don't forget to submit your stories. I'll be waiting and can't wait to read them. He had the fortune, but he lacked the golden ticket to break into the inner circles of the high society elite. And Ghislaine had exactly what he lacked most: an impeccable aristocratic pedigree, the refined elegance of royal class etiquette, and a social network built on the Maxwell name, which, despite its collapse, still carried a lingering weight that couldn't be ignored. With just a single glance, Ghislaine could see right through Epstein's weaknesses, and with surgical precision, she seized the opportunity. She began mapping out a strategy for this social psychological war, reinventing herself as the ultimate gatekeeper, the one who would unlock the doors to the world's elite circles for him. Ghislaine knew all too well that in the highest echelons of society, the mirroring effect is the most potent way to break the ice. The principle was simple. If you want to blend into a circle, you must first transform yourself into the very image of someone they already recognize and accept. She took it upon herself to personally polish Epstein, molding him into the image of a true aristocrat. Ghislaine schooled him on the finer points of formal dining etiquette, teaching him which fork to use at a gala, how to pair the correct glass with the right vintage, and exactly how to carry himself and choose his words when standing before royalty. She refined the way he spoke, stripping away every unrefined habit that might raise an eyebrow, and taught him how to weaponize elegant language to mask the raw ambition burning inside him. Ghislaine even curated his entire wardrobe, from the cut of his suits to the patterns of his ties. Every detail was meticulously aligned with the aesthetic tastes of the upper crust. Under her expert polishing, Epstein's ambitious businessman persona slowly faded, replaced by the image of a refined philanthropist at New York's elite galas. Meanwhile, Ghislaine leveraged her socialite status to act as Epstein's primary icebreaker. She brought him into royal dinner circles and personally introduced him to Britain's Prince Andrew. She also tapped into her late father's network to bring Epstein into the orbit of former US President Bill Clinton, successfully penetrating the innermost circles of global politics. She maneuvered him through Silicon Valley and Wall Street, rebranding Epstein from just another investor into a coveted insider among the powerful. To the New York elite, Ghislaine's status was an unspoken guarantee of Epstein's credibility. They might not have trusted a man who came from nowhere, but they were more than willing to show face and extend their respect to the youngest daughter of the Maxwell dynasty. In exchange, Epstein repaid Ghislaine's dedication with the most tangible reward of all, a life of absolute luxury and limitless financial backing. Epstein showered her with opulence. He handed her the keys to a lavish Manhattan penthouse, provided her with private jets and personal chauffeurs, and ensured that Ghislaine could once again glide into the most exclusive high society events with her head held high. He even helped Ghislaine launch an ocean conservation project called Terramar, a strategic move that allowed her to step back into the spotlight under the new guise of a philanthropist. As time went on, their relationship evolved. What started as a simple romance had transformed into a symbiotic partnership of mutual necessity and exploitation. Epstein was heavily reliant on Ghislaine's social prowess and her vast network, while Ghislaine needed Epstein's wealth and influence as a new, far more formidable security blanket for herself. Yet, no one knew what kind of dark trade was truly hidden beneath the surface of this glittering symbiotic bond. Ghislaine was well aware that every luxury she now enjoyed was solely at Epstein's pleasure. To secure her position and sustain her jet-set lifestyle, she was willing to do anything for him, even if it meant shattering moral norms or breaking the law. From that moment on, Ghislaine's moral compass began to slowly drift off course. She was no longer just a socialite clinging to a powerful man. She had become an active accomplice to his crimes. She believed she had finally found an eternal anchor for her life, never realizing that she was stepping inch by inch into a dark snare woven by Epstein, a black hole that would eventually drag her into a ruin from which there was no return. As her bond with Epstein deepened, Ghislaine slowly began to touch a darkness that remained hidden from the rest of the world. She came to realize that the seemingly refined philanthropist harbored a chilling sexual deviance, one where his wealth and power were merely tools to facilitate his most depraved desires. To satisfy Epstein's needs and to tighten her grip on the only lifeline she had left, Ghislaine took matters into her own hands. Starting in 1994, she began weaving a complex and highly organized illegal network, eventually cementing her role as the mastermind and lead operator running the show from the shadows. She weaponized her socialite status and effortless charm to zero in on her targets, underage girls between the ages of 14 and 17, coming from broken homes and financial hardship. These girls lived on the fringes of society. They were desperate for a chance at a better life, but had no one to protect them. They were the most vulnerable and the easiest to lure and control. Ghislaine reinvented herself as a gentle big sister figure, using the lure of high-paying jobs and educational opportunities as bait to approach these girls. She would often show up in impoverished neighborhoods or at modeling schools, bearing sweet little gifts and soothing words to steal their hearts and win their trust. She promised them one thing: if they just came with her, they'd land stable jobs, get the chance to rub shoulders with high society heavyweights, and change their destinies forever. These innocent girls fell for it, agreeing to follow her without a second thought. But the moment they stepped foot into Epstein's Palm Beach mansion, his elite New York apartment, or his private island in the Caribbean, they realized that what awaited them wasn't a bright future, it was an endless darkness. Their passports were seized, their phones confiscated, and they were kept under strict 24-hour surveillance. The so-called high-paying jobs were nothing but a front. The reality awaiting them was a relentless cycle of sexual abuse and dehumanizing treatment. Ghislaine wasn't just fully complicit. She was responsible for controlling and breaking these girls. She even introduced them to Epstein's elite circle, turning them into mere playthings for the powerful. According to court documents that later came to light, Ghislaine acted as the central axis of this illegal network. She was in charge of recruiting, vetting, controlling, and coordinating every minute detail to ensure the operation ran like clockwork. During her trial, U.S. federal prosecutors stated emphatically, without Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's criminal enterprise could never have survived for nearly 20 years. She was the architect, the operator, and the most essential link in the chain. Despite everything, Ghislaine remained defiant, denying it all. She claimed to be nothing more than a casual friend of Epstein's, insisting she was completely in the dark about what was going on. But the evidence was ironclad. The survivors' testimonies, the email trails between her and Epstein, and the mountain of physical evidence recovered from the scenes, everything boxed her in, leaving her with absolutely no room to maneuver. Driven by a desperate need to cling to her luxury and social standing, she callously sacrificed the futures of countless underage girls, pushing them into an abyss of suffering. But in the end, she herself wandered too far down that dark path, so far that she reached a point of no return. In July 2019, the veil of darkness that had remained tightly sealed for nearly 20 years was finally torn apart. The FBI launched a surprise raid on Epstein's Palm Beach mansion, seizing a mountain of incriminating evidence. The generous billionaire who had lived a life of absolute triumph was officially arrested on charges of sex trafficking minors and running an illegal enterprise. The news exploded, sending shockwaves around the globe. The powerful figures who once rubbed shoulders with Epstein suddenly went stone-cold silent. Meanwhile, Ghislaine was consumed by an overwhelming panic. She knew all too well that Epstein's arrest was the death knell for her own secrets. In a desperate bid to evade the law, she chose to go on the run. But just as everyone thought the truth was finally about to come to light, a far more bizarre piece of news suddenly broke. In August 2019, in a shocking turn of events, Epstein was found to have taken his own life inside his prison cell. Epstein's death left behind a mountain of unanswered questions. By a stroke of uncanny luck, the prison's CCTV cameras happened to malfunction at the exact moment of the incident, coupled with a string of bizarre inconsistencies found at the crime scene. The public erupted with suspicion. Some viewed it as a freak accident, while others were convinced he took his own life out of sheer terror of facing the legal consequences. There were also plenty of people convinced that the powers that be had orchestrated the incident to silence him for good. But whatever the truth may be, Epstein's death pushed the investigation into a tangled dead end. Now, Ghislaine was the only one left standing, forced into the spotlight to answer for their illegal empire. Shortly after Epstein was pronounced dead, Ghislaine vanished into thin air. She hid away in a secluded luxury estate in New Hampshire, living under a false identity. Her life was shrouded in secrecy, guarded heavily by private security, and she even went as far as altering her appearance to evade the police. She felt safe, tucked away from the world, but as the saying goes, you can run, but you can't hide. In July 2020, following a trail of precision intel, the FBI raided Ghislaine's hideout. Inside the lavish estate, they discovered forged passports, stacks of cash, and a trove of incriminating evidence linked to Epstein. After a year on the run, the socialite's flight from justice finally came to a grinding halt. Following her arrest, Ghislaine remained steadfast in her claims of innocence. Her legal team repeatedly argued that she was nothing more than a scapegoat for Epstein, a figure conveniently sacrificed to shoulder all the blame alone. Yet, in the face of a mountain of evidence and the soul-crushing testimonies of the survivors, those defenses felt hollow and utterly powerless. In December 2021, the Manhattan Federal Court in New York finally convened for Ghislaine's trial. A jury panel of 6 men and 6 women, after 40 hours of intense and grueling deliberations, finally handed down the verdict. Ghislaine was found guilty on 5 counts, including serious felonies such as sex trafficking of minors and conspiracy to run an illegal network. During the trial, several survivors appeared in person to give their testimonies. Through tears, they recounted the harrowing stories of how they were trapped, controlled, and violated by Ghislaine. One witness testified that Ghislaine's smile was actually quite sweet. She looked every bit the loving big sister, but her eyes were so cold they would send shivers down your spine. Another witness shared that Ghislaine knew exactly where their weaknesses lay. She exploited their ambitions and their hopes for a better life, only to plunge them into an abyss of suffering. Others testified that for years they lived in a constant shadow of fear, never daring to speak a word of what happened, terrified of the possibility of retaliation. In June 2022, the judge finally sentenced Ghislaine to 20 years in prison. In the ruling, the judge stated that Ghislaine had shown absolutely no remorse. She had weaponized her status and connections to prey on the most vulnerable, an act deemed so heinous that it became the very foundation of the court's sentencing decision. From the status of a billionaire's daughter to a captive behind iron bars, Ghislaine's life has truly hit rock bottom. Since beginning her sentence, she spent time at the Brooklyn Detention Center before being transferred to a low-security prison in Florida. In the summer of 2025, she was moved again, this time to a minimum security prison camp in Texas. This relatively lax facility sparked widespread controversy and even caught the attention of Congress. As of February 2026, as a steady stream of newly unsealed court documents continues to reach the public, her position has become increasingly precarious. Barring any unforeseen changes, she is expected to remain behind bars until July 2037, by which time she will be 76 years old. Her entire life has been a tapestry of controversy and tragedy. Born into the highest echelons of society, she ended up losing the very thing she took for granted, her freedom. She spent her life leaning on the power of giants, yet it was that very same power that ultimately dragged her into the abyss. By her own hand, she has become a pariah. Forced to watch the rest of her days wither away behind iron bars is greater than. Some see her as a victim, a casualty of childhood trauma, a controlling father, and the desperate sacrifices she made just to maintain her existence within the hypocritical upper crust. Yet, many others remain convinced that she deserves every bit of her sentence as the shadow figure who shattered the lives of so many girls. While her childhood trauma and family turmoil may have left deep scars and warped her values, those can never serve as a justification for trampling over the law and inflicting pain on others. With her background and undeniable intellect, she had every opportunity to build a brilliant future to rise again, even after the collapse of her family empire. Instead, she chose to subserviently serve Epstein, orchestrating crimes that traded the suffering of others for her own personal luxury. In the end, she was swallowed whole by the very darkness she chose for herself. Ghislaine's story is more than just a personal tragedy. It is a mirror reflecting the sheer hypocrisy and darkness of the elite world. It is a stark portrait of how power and money intertwine to fuel depravity, and how little regard those at the top have for the vulnerable. Even as millions of pages from the Epstein files are unsealed, many mysteries remain intentionally buried and countless puzzles are left unsolved. While the powerful figures behind the scenes still breathe the air of freedom, the girls who were their victims remain shackled by deep-seated trauma scars that may never truly heal. Ghislaine's 20-year sentence is a mere glimmer of solace for the survivors, yet it is far from the definition of true justice. When power is allowed to override the rules, when money can mask the stains of crime, And when the strong feel entitled to oppress the weak, tragedies like this are bound to repeat themselves. In the end, Ghislaine was nothing more than a pawn in the elite's dirty game. She once believed she could control it all, but now it is she who is controlled by her own fate. The story of Ghislaine Maxwell is a chilling reminder that behind the glitz and glamour of the elite, there often lies an unimaginable darkness. But one major question remains. Has justice truly been served, or was Ghislaine merely the final sacrificial lamb to protect the other giants still hiding in the shadows? I want to hear your thoughts. Is 20 years enough to atone for the scars left on the survivors, or is this just the system's way of burying even bigger secrets? Drop your theories or thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next investigation. Thank you for following this journey to the end. And remember, if you're still watching this, maybe you're looking for the same thing I am.